They've had what they call a spiritual awakening, and they're devastated. I've lost everything, they say. My relationships don't make sense anymore. My work feels meaningless. My ambitions have evaporated. Even my sense of who I am seems to be disappearing. I thought awakening was supposed to make me feel complete, but instead I feel like I'm falling apart. And I listen to them, and I nod, because what they're describing is absolutely real. Spiritual awakening does feel like losing everything. But here's what I want you to understand. It feels like losing everything because you are losing everything. Everything false, that is. Everything that was never really yours to begin with. And the terror you feel is not the terror of actual loss, it's the terror of recognizing that what you thought was solid ground beneath your feet was always just a dream. Let me explain what I mean. From the moment you were born, you've been given an identity. Your parents gave you a name. Society gave you a role. Your culture gave you beliefs, values, expectations, and gradually, layer by layer, you constructed something called myself. This self had preferences, opinions, memories, hopes for the future. It had a story, where it came from, what happened to it, where it was going. And you identified with this constructed self so completely that you forgot it was a construction. You thought it was you, the real you, the solid, permanent, unchanging essence at the core of your being. And everything you did, every decision you made, every relationship you formed, was organized around protecting and promoting this self. This fiction. Now, what happens in spiritual awakening is that you begin to see through the fiction. Not intellectually, anyone can understand intellectually that the ego is a construct. But experientially, you have a direct recognition that this thing you've been calling I is nothing more than a collection of thoughts, memories, and sensations loosely held together by habit and belief. There's no solid center, no unchanging core, just a flowing process, moment by moment, with no one actually in control. And this recognition is absolutely devastating, because if there's no solid self, then who are you? If your identity is just a story, then what happens to all the things that were important to that story? Your achievements suddenly seem hollow. Who achieved them? Your relationships become confusing. Who is relating to whom? Your plans for the future collapse. Whose future is it anyway? This is why awakening feels like losing everything. You're losing the imaginary ground you were standing on. You're losing the fictional character you thought you were. You're losing the entire elaborate game of becoming somebody, getting somewhere, making something of yourself. And the mind reacts to this loss the way it would react to any loss, with grief, with fear, with desperate attempts to regain what's been lost. You try to reconstruct your old identity. You try to find new beliefs to replace the old ones. You try to fill the void with spiritual concepts, new practices, new goals, anything to avoid the naked recognition that there is no one there, that there never was. But you see, this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think the loss is the problem, and they need to find a way to restore what's been lost. They think awakening has broken something that needs to be fixed. But the loss is not the problem, the loss is the solution. What you're losing was always the source of your suffering. The imaginary self, with its endless needs and fears and desires, was the problem all along. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're watching a film, and you've become completely absorbed in it. You've identified with the protagonist. When he's in danger, your heart races. When he suffers, you suffer. When he triumphs, you feel triumphant. The story has become your story. His feelings have become your feelings. Now, what happens if someone suddenly reminds you that it's just a film, that the protagonist isn't real, that none of it is actually happening? There's a moment of disorientation, isn't there? A sense of loss, because the investment you had in that story, the emotional reality of it, suddenly becomes absurd. And yet, Nothing real has been lost. No one actually died or suffered. It was always just images on a screen. This is what spiritual awakening reveals. The story of your life, the character called you, is like that film. It's not that your life is meaningless or unimportant. The film can still be appreciated, enjoyed, engaged with. But the desperate identification with the character, the belief that you are that character and that your survival depends on how the story turns out, that's what collapses. And yes, it feels like losing everything because you've invested everything in that identification. Now, here's the difficult part. You can't simply decide to stop identifying with the character. You can't think your way out of it or will your way out of it, because the very you that would be trying to escape is itself part of the identification. It's like trying to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. It can't be done. What happens instead is that the identification wears itself out. Through seeing, through awareness, through simply observing the process without trying to control it, the false self gradually loses its power over you. Not because you've defeated it or transcended it, but because you've seen through it. And once you've truly seen through something, you can't unsee it. This process of seeing through the false self is what causes the feeling of loss. Every time you see through another belief, another attachment, another identity, there's a little death. And spiritual awakening is not one death, it's 1,000 deaths. The death of who you thought you were, the death of what you thought life was supposed to be, the death of your certainty, your security, your solid ground. People often speak of spiritual awakening as if it's a single event, one dramatic moment of enlightenment after which everything is clear and settled. But this is rarely how it works. More often, it's a gradual process of dissolution. Things that once seemed important gradually lose their grip on you. Relationships that were based on your false identity naturally fall away or transform. Ambitions that were really just attempts to prove your worth become transparently absurd. The whole structure of your life, built on the foundation of a fictitious self, begins to crumble. And this crumbling is terrifying, because you don't know what, if anything, will replace it. You're in a state of not knowing, and the human mind abhors not knowing. We want certainty, we want solid ground, we want to know who we are and where we're going. But awakening strips all of that away. The great mystics have called this phase the dark night of the soul. And it is dark, make no mistake about it. You feel lost, abandoned, meaningless. Everything you once relied on for a sense of identity and purpose has been revealed as empty. And you haven't yet discovered what lies beyond that emptiness. You're in the void, the gap between the false and the true. Many people, when they reach this point, turn back. They can't tolerate the void, so they reconstruct a new identity, often a spiritual identity. They become the awakened one, the seeker, the enlightened being. But this is just the ego wearing new clothes. It's the same game of separation and becoming, just with different costumes and different props. The real passage through this dark night requires something that most people find almost impossible: doing nothing, not trying to fix yourself, not trying to find a new identity, not trying to fill the void, just being with the loss, the emptiness, the not knowing, allowing it to be exactly as it is, without rushing to resolve it or escape from it. And here's the extraordinary thing that happens when you can simply be with the loss without trying to fix it. You begin to discover that the emptiness is not empty. The void is not vacant. In fact, what you thought was loss was actually an opening. What you thought was death was actually birth. You see, when the false self dissolves, what remains is not nothing, what remains is everything. When you stop being the small, separate, defended entity trying to survive in a hostile universe, you discover that you are the universe itself, not as a concept or a belief, but as a direct experience. The boundaries that seem to separate you from the world dissolve, and you recognize that you are not in the universe, you are the universe. experiencing itself from this particular point of view. This is what the Hindus mean when they say tat tvamasi, thou art that. This is what the Buddhists mean by the doctrine of no self. Not that you don't exist, but that the small, separate self you thought you were is an illusion. What you really are is the whole cosmos, playing at being this particular individual for a while. But you can't get to this recognition by trying to achieve it. You can only get there by losing everything that stands in the way. And that's why awakening feels like losing everything, because you have to lose the illusion of separation before you can recognize the reality of unity. Let me be clear about something, though. I'm not saying that after this process you'll become some kind of superhuman being without problems or pain. You'll still have a body that gets sick and grows old. You'll still have preferences and personality traits. You'll still engage with the world, make decisions, form relationships. The difference is that you won't be fooled into thinking that the person doing all these things is a separate, independent entity that needs to be defended and promoted at all costs. Life continues, but the desperate quality to it disappears. Things still matter, but not in the same heavy, anxious way. You still care about things, but you're not attached to outcomes in the same way. You play the game of life, but you know it's a game. And this knowing transforms everything. So when you feel like you're losing everything in your awakening, understand that what you're really losing is your suffering. What you're losing is the burden of being a separate self, constantly struggling to survive and succeed. What you're losing is the prison of your own thoughts about who you should be and what your life should look like. And yes, this loss is painful, exquisitely painful at times, because it involves the death of everything you thought was real and important. But on the other side of that death is something so vast and free and joyful that all the loss becomes worthwhile. On the other side is the recognition that you never had anything to lose in the first place, because you were never the small, separate thing you thought you were. You are the ocean, not the wave. And the wave can crash and dissolve, but the ocean remains. You are the sky, not the cloud, and the cloud can dissipate and disappear, but the sky is untouched. This is what you discover when you stop running from the loss and allow yourself to fall completely into it. So don't resist the feeling of losing everything. Don't try to hold on to what's dissolving. Let it go. Let it all go. The relationships, the ambitions, the beliefs, the identity, all of it. Not because you should, not as a spiritual practice, but because you're discovering that you can't hold on anyway. It's all slipping through your fingers like water, and always was. And in that letting go, in that surrender, in that complete acceptance of loss, you'll find what can never be lost. You'll find what you really are. Beneath all the layers of conditioning and belief, you'll find the eternal, unchanging awareness that was there before you were born and